Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Capital District Transportation Committee's New Visions Virtual Learning Series. This monthly webinar series began a couple years ago after the adoption of our Metropolitan Transportation Plan, New Visions 2050. My name is Jennifer Sponis. I am the Director of Regional Planning here at CDTC. So I know everyone has been doing webinars and online meetings now for quite some time, but just some reminders. This is a webinar, so your mic is muted and you can see us, but we cannot see you. Please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A function in Zoom if you have questions during presentations, and we'll address them at the end. Or if you're having any trouble using those, you can raise your hand and we'll unmute you. This webinar has been approved for 1.5 certification maintenance credits through APA. This has also been approved for a credit in the special topics area for sustainability and resiliency. So if you are AICP, the special topics area is a new certification maintenance area. And if you are on a planning or zoning board and your municipality has approved CDTC webinars, these can also count as part of your New York State Department of State training requirements. The next webinar in this series is October 18th. October is Pedestrian Safety Month, so we will have a webinar on pedestrian safety planning, and you can register from the CDTC website. Previous New Visions webinars are all recorded and uploaded to the CDTC New Visions Virtual Learning Series webpage, which you can also find on our website, along with other resources. So today we have 4 panelists who are going to talk about different electric vehicle planning tools and strategies, and really provide some insight on their experience here in the capital region, moving our transportation system towards electrification. So I'll do a brief overview of CDTC's New Visions plan and goals. And then Jacob Beeman, who is a transportation planner here at the Capital District Transportation Committee, will talk about the Capital District ZEV plan and implementation progress. Jacob is also the Capital District Clean Communities Coalition coordinator. And then he'll pass it to Tara Donadio from the Capital District Regional Planning Commission. Tara is a sustainability planner at CDRPC, where she has worked with Nyserda's Clean Energy Communities Program and DEC's Climate Smart Communities Program. After Tara, Brandon Mortka, who is the Director of Commercial Sales with Plug-in Stations Online, will talk about EV charging station installation and what he does there at plug-in stations. And then lastly, we have Lucas Rogers, who's the Economic Development and Sustainability Coordinator for the Office of the Albany County Executive, who will talk about Albany County's experience electrifying their fleet. And just in the spirit of electric vehicles, next week is National Drive Electric Week, and there are 2 electric vehicle events here in the Capital District if you're interested. One in Del Mar at the Farmers Market and one in Schenectady at the Green Market. So for those who may not know or have heard about CDTC's New Visions plan, New Visions 2050 is the Metropolitan Transportation Plan for the Capital District. The Metropolitan Transportation Plan is a major MPO product here at CDTC. It's a blueprint for regional transportation that reflects a shared vision for our future, and it guides the prioritization and funding of investment decisions throughout the region. And it's developed collaboratively with different stakeholders, transportation providers, and the public. If you're wondering what implementing this plan looks like, it's the completion of a lot of these projects that you are probably familiar with, like the bus rapid transit system, the Albany County Rail Trail, the replacement of the Rexford Bridge, or the I-87 Exit 3 Airport Connector that was just completed about 2 years ago, along with a bunch of other regionally significant projects. So the Metropolitan Transportation Plan kind of looks at regional trends and then decides where the region is going based on those trends, or how can we direct investments to move towards our preferred future based on our trends. So quick snapshot of the capital region, where we've been, where we're headed. The capital region is a slow growth region, despite being the capital and having very steady industries and employment. We've been a slow growth region, and we're not projected to grow significantly over the next several decades. Despite that little growth, the region has experienced quite a bit of development, and with that development, so has increase in driving and emissions. Emissions from vehicles as of 2020 were up 17% in total and 7% per capita since 1990, while the population grew at a slower rate. And we have a robust network of infrastructure, including highways, bridges, sidewalks, trails, bike facilities, and bus rapid transit that connects the region and that we are responsible for maintaining and improving. And we've developed a connected network of transportation systems and services through careful planning throughout the years, through previous metropolitan transportation plans. We've decided where to invest funds to improve mobility and accessibility throughout the region. We have a very robust electric vehicle charging station network, which Jacob and everyone will be talking about, but we also have a network and backbone of freight facilities here in the region with the Port of Albany and the airport. We have a regional trail network and a miles of roads and bridges, as we mentioned before. And we're moving throughout the region and throughout different modes. Majority of capital region commuters are driving alone to work, but we do continue to see different modes and new services throughout the region. It is that 22.7 million vehicle miles traveled daily that we're looking to shift as many of those miles as possible to electric to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions and meet our regional goals. And besides driving, we do have other options like our bike share system. CDTA recently rolled out scooters as part of the scooter share system, car share, and continue to invest in transit to expand access to efficient and comfortable transit throughout the region. So while we've developed a reliable multimodal system, we're always anticipating changes and possible disruptions, other issues and concerns that affect our transportation system. So the Metropolitan Transportation Plan considers these, looks at these, and develops a strategy for how the region will overcome uncertainty, meet our goals, and solve transportation issues in the long range in a way that improves and maintains quality of life throughout the capital region. So that's just a quick overview of what our Metropolitan Transportation Plan New Visions is. We implement it through our work plan, so all the tasks that CDTC does, and then through the Transportation Improvement Program, which is the capital program. This virtual learning series is also meant as part of the implementation to help provide local governments with the tools to move the goals in the plan forward. We are always happy to do training or workshops, presentations to planning boards, zoning boards, town boards, or city councils by request. And that's just my email address. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. So with that, I am going to pass it to Jacob. And Jacob, just let me know when to move the screen forward.
Okay, thank you. So Jacob Beeman, Senior Transportation Planner here at Capital District Transportation Committee, and also the coordinator for our Capital District Clean Communities Coalition, which I will kind of talk about a little more in a few slides. But just want to kind of give a highlight or high-level overview of kind of the current status of electric vehicles in New York State and the region, and what we can do at CDTC and as the Clean Cities Coalition to help kind of advance electric vehicle planning. So again, high level electric vehicles in New York State, just kind of really the big legislation that's driving electric vehicles forward is the Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act. That's setting some really high level greenhouse gas emission reduction goals, primarily 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions from 1990 levels by 2050. So that's really the big one that we're chasing. And then within that, the plan and some of the scoping documents that are out there right now kind of give some guidance on, what exactly the targets for electric vehicles are if we expect to meet those greenhouse gas emission reductions. So first one would be, they're expecting, or the state is expecting to have around 3 million zero emission light duty vehicles on the road by 2030. And then by 2050, 10 million zero emission light duty vehicles on the road. And then, to meet that, the goal is to have almost 100% of all light duty vehicle sales and about 40% of medium and heavy duty vehicle sales to be zero emission by 2030. So, and to really kind of put that into perspective, as of November of last year, there were about 9 million light duty vehicles on the road in New York State. And there was less than 1% of those being electric. So, and you'll notice we're kind of mixing zero emission and electric. Zero emission would kind of be the broader term for, if hydrogen vehicles kind of enter the market, which there aren't really a whole lot of hydrogen electric light duty or medium vehicle duties at this point. So that's kind of just a more all-encompassing term, but really, when we're talking about on the road today and in the future, it will, these are kind of talking about battery electric vehicles. Next slide, Jen. So what can we do to help? At CDTC, we kind of have a number of options to help advance, planning for electric vehicles or zero emission vehicles. First and foremost, we do host our Capital District Clean Communities Coalition, which I'm going to get into in the next few slides. And with that, we have developed a couple of regional electric vehicle plans over the past few years. And we can also kind of work more directly with private fleets and municipalities, providing them some technical assistance in looking at total cost of ownership of electric vehicles versus gas or diesel vehicles. And also we work on just kind of outreach events like what we're doing today to help kind of spread the word on the technology and really kind of just help people learn more about electric vehicles and all alternative fuel vehicles for that matter. Next slide. So, I mentioned our Capital District Clean Communities Coalition, and what that is it's, so what is Clean Cities? Our Capital District Clean Communities Coalition is just one of many coalitions that is part of a greater U.S. Department of Energy kind of sponsored program called Clean Cities. And the Clean Cities program is really a network of local coalitions across the country. I think there's about 100 of them. And we really work on grassroots efforts to really reduce greenhouse gas emissions. We do that through, connecting with local, private, public stakeholders that are all kind of interested in alternative fuels, reducing emissions. And also we want to promote kind of reduce dependence on imported petroleum products. So not only is there a focus on reducing the emissions, but also kind of from the resiliency standpoint as well, by promoting all different types of alternative fuels. We become more resilient rather than just depending on gasoline and diesel. I should also mention that, again, the coalition itself, we are a fuel neutral. So not only do we focus on, advancing electric vehicles, but also propane, CNG, biofuels, hydrogen. If there is a fleet or an interested party in our region who come to us with questions, the idea is that we're going to try to help them, advance the fuel that works best for them. Next slide. So again, a little bit more, we really focus on our partnerships with, locals. It is public, it is private. So, anybody from, a general consumer to a private trucking fleet or a municipal fleet. If you're interested in, investigating what it would take to adopt electric vehicles, it's our goal to try to help make that happen. By putting you in contact with industry experts, vehicle manufacturers, vehicle dealers, infrastructure manufacturers, infrastructure installers like we have on the call today. Really, that is the goal of our coalition. Doing that through one-on-one meetings, phone calls, like I mentioned, the technical assistance, and also just hosting kind of educational events, webinars, or in-person meetings where we try to get some of that newest technology kind of, here at the office or in a convenient location for folks to come out and see, the latest in electric vehicles. So next slide. So that was kind of the high level of the coalition. And then now I'm going to get a little bit into what we've done in the past in terms of electric vehicle planning. So if actually, through a combination of the coalition and CDTC, the MPO, we've kind of really been doing some electric vehicle planning for quite a while now. Starting back in 2016, CDTC completed our first Capital District electric vehicle charging station plan. This was a consultant-led effort. I think Jen at the time was leading the charge on this. That plan was really kind of our first foray into EV planning and really kind of an early stage layout of the land for what was the existing electric vehicle registrations at the time, existing charging stations at the time. And then it also went on to kind of identify particular sites in the region that could benefit from additional level 2 charging, and also began the process of identifying some of the federal alternative fuel corridors in the region that we will kind of hear about more later on, and where that's come, now in 2022 from the early stages in 2016. So in 2019, a few years later, that plan, we realized that kind of the times had changed, and we did update that plan and finalize that in early 2020. Some of the big factors between, the original and the revision, you'll notice we changed, that one is called the Zero Emission Vehicle Plan, again, to kind of account for hydrogen vehicles, as well as kind of the addition of e-mobility options, so e-bikes and e-scooters that we were kind of seeing enter the landscape that weren't really on the radar in 2016. Another big factor that kind of led to that update was that, even from 2016 to 2020 or 2019, when we kind of began the process, there was a real big change in the technology you could see that ranges were increasing and costs of electric vehicles were decreasing. So we kind of wanted to touch base on that and, you know, kind of bring light to that point. Some of the stats that we had looked at when the 2016 plan was originally released, electric vehicles had a range from about 60 to 265 miles. But that 265-mile range would have costed you about $70,000 at the time. And then in 2019, when we, you know, kind of started the process, there were electric vehicles available that had over 300 miles of range for around, you know, $35,000 to $40,000. So there was a big change in the technology from 16 to 20, and then, you know, we've seen that again now in 2022, which is why, you know, we'll kind of be taking a look at this and seeing if, you know, this deserves another revision, you know, in the near future to kind of, you know, catch up with everything that's happened in the past few years. Next slide. So just going to couple slides here to touch on the highlights from the most recent plan that you know, we finalized in 2020. One of the big ones was that we took a look at the regional commutes, and we really found out that capital district commutes were really very well aligned with electric vehicle ranges, and that was in 2019. So we you know, took a look using some publicly available data from the National Household Travel Survey, as well as the American Community Survey census data. It looked like the average daily commute to work was about 11 miles one way. So if we're really just looking at the commute to and back from work, average commuter in the region is about a 22-mile trip. At that time, there were 53 models with an all-electric range of 22 miles or greater. That was about 70% of all models available at the time. So really just wanted to kind of point out with that was that even, you know, 3 years ago, the technology was there, right? Electric vehicle technology, it exists and it's here, and it's viable for most commuters. So, you know, that was really kind of a big takeaway, that a lot of the questions we get, it's, you know, when the technology advances, or when is this going to happen, or, you know, when will the ranges increase? But really at the most basic level, a lot of the electric vehicles available then, and of course now today, are really capable of meeting, you know, most daily needs. Next slide. Number two, highlights or incentives. So of course in New York State, you know, I would think that many of you on the call are at least a little bit familiar with all of the incentives and rebates that are potentially available for electric vehicles and the charging stations. So first one, the federal electric vehicle tax credit. So of course that's a you know, nationwide tax credit that's available. It's structured, you know, up to $7,500 in rebates for vehicles that, and it's a tiered rebate system based on the total mileage that the battery electric vehicle can travel, as well as there's limits to, there are existing limits to manufacturers with caps on certain manufacturers. So Tesla and Chevy, for instance, I believe are not eligible for this credit anymore. However, I have read recently that the new Inflation Reduction Act is making some changes in how you can access this, the federal electric vehicle tax credit. Again, making changes to kind of those particular OEMs that are able to access the credit, as well as ways to redeem that credit. So in one of them that I've read is that there's talks that the credit can kind of be transferred to dealers, so you receive the $7,500 up front. But again, those are kind of in flux right now, but that is still available. And it can be combined with the New York State Charge New York Drive Clean rebate. So this is a rebate of up to $2,500. And this is at the point of $2,000 for vehicles with over 200 miles of all electric range. And then it tiers down from there, depending on the vehicle range, as well as the price of the vehicle. There is a cap for more expensive vehicles that you can only get $500 in rebate. So those are both for light duty vehicles. Also in New York State right now, a big one is the New York State Truck Voucher Incentive Program, which offers up to 100% of incremental cost over a diesel for medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. This is administered by Nyserda. Our coalition actually provides support on this to provide additional information to interested fleets and stakeholders. So if there's an interest of adopting an all electric shuttle bus or stake body truck, medium and heavy duty pickups, I would encourage you to reach out to us after the call, and we could try to set up a little bit of an information session on that, because there are some really great incentives available for the medium and heavy duty vehicles right now. On top of that, we also have our Municipal Zab Rebate, which is for municipalities only. That offers up to $7,500 rebate for light duty vehicles. And again, that's a tiered structure. So I believe it's vehicles over 200 miles of range. You can access that $7,500 and it works its way down from there. And so all of those were kind of existing when we completed the plan in 2020. We now also have the National Grid Make Ready program. So this helps folks install the infrastructure itself on the kind of on the it doesn't provide funding for the charger itself. It's more on the utility side of things, and it would provide incentives for the power upgrades that would be necessary to install the EV charging. National Grid also provides a fleet inventory service to help fleets kind of evaluate what their additional power need would be if they were to transition to electric. So that's another great one as well. The one that you see on the bottom of the Charge Ready New York program that we have in red was actually a program that provided up to $8,000 for public level 2 charging stations in New York. And that's actually been offline for the past year. However, I have heard, kind of whispers that will be, coming back online this fall. So that's another one to keep an eye out for, and that was very heavily utilized, by a lot of public and private fleets as well as workplaces over the past few years. Next slide. So what does this all mean? Really, with kind of the plan took away that the Capital District was kind of really, a great place for electric vehicles, and it was moving in the right direction. By the chart here, you can see over the past 10 years, there's been a massive growth in electric vehicles on the road. Currently, we're just over 6,600 registered EVs. That includes full battery electric and plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. Since that plan was completed in early 2020, we've seen about 114% growth in EVs on the road. So it's only growing year over year. So it'll be excited to see kind of where this chart looks in another year or two. Next slide. Kind of same outlook on the charging side of things. Seen a massive growth, especially over the past 4 years. Currently at 11 or almost 1,200 public level 2 charging stations in the region at this point. Next slide. So kind of the big takeaways from that planning process that we had, we did identify some electric vehicle barriers and opportunities. And again, this was in 2019, but really a lot of these are kind of holding true today. One of the big barriers is the demand charges that are associated with electric vehicles. There is an uncertainty, especially when we're looking at DC fast charging, that the electrical rates could kind of increase unexpectedly if they are kind of pulling electricity during peak demand times. And that is something that's kind of an unknown that still is it's a bit of a pause for folks that are interested in adopting electric vehicles, especially at the fleet level. Also, access to home charging. If you own a single family home with a garage, you can pretty easily install a level 2 charger in most cases. However, multifamily housing and housing in urban areas, it's a little more difficult to install a charger at your home if you don't have parking. If on-street parking and things like that, it's a little more difficult to have charging available at home. And that's still kind of a big barrier that's holding folks back today. Also, electric vehicle pricing. It is perceived to be very high, and those prices are coming down. However, the cost of a new vehicle is still quite expensive. But we do see those things moving in the right direction, especially just in the past few years. And then big opportunities, really, right? If we wanted to keep seeing electric vehicles advance, one of the big things is municipal EV readiness policy. So for folks on the call that are municipal staff or representatives, what can you do with your comprehensive plan or your zoning code to kind of get ahead of electric vehicle charging installations, making it easier to install those charging stations, and therefore kind of making it easier for your residents to access EV charging. Also, just really general education to elected officials as well as the general public. There's still a lot of things out there that are unknowns with electric vehicles. It really is a change in lifestyle, right? It's not just going to buy a different vehicle. Your trips are planned differently. Where you get your charging or where you get your fuel is different. How long you can, where you can access that is all different. So it's something that really is still an opportunity, and that's what really we're trying to kind of continuously promote this and provide educational opportunities. Next slide. And then really, so to kind of finalize that, right now, as the MPO, we also have oversight over federal funding opportunities. And there are some new federal funding opportunities coming down that are going to provide, more money for EV charging. The bill that was passed last year is set to invest about $7.5 billion to electric vehicles and alternative fuels. The first piece of that is $2.5 billion for all alternative fuels. Again, that includes compressed natural gas, liquid natural gas, propane, as well as hydrogen. But then more specifically, there's the National Electric Vehicle Formula Program. So that's $5 billion specifically for EV corridors. So if you, earlier on, I mentioned in our planning process, we were helping to identify alternative fuel corridors at the federal level. So federally, there are specific corridors across the country that are designated as alternative fuels corridors, and then again, more specifically, electric vehicle corridors. And those are kind of major interregional routes that have been identified across the country that are going to help, cross-country travel, interregional travel, and really where, the next focus of EV charging installation is going to be focused at the federal level. Next slide. So to access that funding, each state has had to release a National Electric Vehicle Charging Infrastructure Plan. New York State officially completed their plan, I believe, early August. And that will provide more information if you're interested on how they plan to spend that NEVI funding and where they plan to spend that NEVI funding. So really the big takeaway from that piece is that in our region, at least, those electric fuel or electric vehicle corridors are I-90, 87, 88, and 81. It's really the interstates in New York State. And the funding that is available will be used to install DC fast charging at 50-mile intervals along those corridors. You know, there are more criteria to that, so it'll be 50-mile intervals along the corridors and up to a mile off from an exit. And so the state is working through to identify those locations that they feel are going to be best served to access this funding. And there is kind of stipulation in there where if those corridors are able to be built out in the state and there's funding left over, and then there's an opportunity for that funding to be spent elsewhere. But that is not really kind of identified at this point yet in the plan, but that is something to be, you know, kind of keeping an eye out for in the next few years. And then also, you know, another really good federal resource, there's a federal electric vehicle charging infrastructure guidebook. And this kind of highlights all of the different federal fund sources and which ones can be spent on electric vehicle charging, electric vehicle planning, or the vehicles themselves. And I have the links to both of these that I'm going to put in the chat after I'm done. But these are really good resources if you're interested in kind of what's out there for federal funding in terms of electric vehicles and electric vehicle charging. Next slide. And so I guess, you know, really to wrap it up, how can we help? Again, the CDTC and the Clean Communities Coalition, we are able to provide fleet technical assistance, really total cost of ownership analysis, as well as providing connections to industry experts, other example fleets, not only within the region, but we have access to, again, those coalitions that are across the country. You know, if there's questions on different vehicles, there's a good chance that you know, we'll be able to make contact with another fleet out there who's using that vehicle or have had kind of the similar experiences or barriers in adoption. So we'd be happy to help try to work through those. We can also offer, you know, help with EV zoning and policy guidance. You know, we mentioned that as one of those opportunities. Comprehensive plan and zoning audits to see where maybe some electric vehicle language could fit in. And really just kind of recommending some policies that would streamline the charging infrastructure process to help make it easier for new development to install EV charging. And then really just additional outreach and education events. You know, we can host our own events like we are today, but if your municipality or your fleet or just a general kind of community group is interested in learning more, we'd be happy to try to set up a outreach event, webinar, in-person meeting to just go over details of electric vehicles and electric vehicle planning. And I think that's it for me.
Hey, Jacob, there is one quick question about the tax breaks. I know I said we would do questions at the end, but does the $7,500 tax rebate apply to a second electric vehicle?
I am not really sure. I've been trying to dig into these tax credits a little more recently and not ever purchasing one myself. I find it a little difficult to decipher them. I don't really think I've seen anything that's saying that's that it's not
Right.
that it wouldn't apply. I would think that the issues would maybe be if you would apply for multiple in the same year, it does have a cap at what you owe. So, you know, if they were stacked and you didn't owe what the credit was, then it would kind of cap out. But I'm not 100% sure on that. I always, when I get the federal tax credit questions, I always would say consult your tax expert. I can certainly look into that a little more, David.
Thanks, Sheena. Okay. So the next presenter is Tara. Tara, if you want to share your screen.
Yes. All right. So thanks so much for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about state programs, the support that we provide at CDRPC, the Capital District Regional Planning Commission, and some of the communities that have participated in this program in the Capital Region. So my name is Donadio. I am the Assistant Director of Sustainability here at CDRPC. I work with a team. Our sustainability team here is very busy supporting 2 New York State programs. So our Director of Sustainability, Todd Babozzi, and then our outreach staff, myself, Haley Belkanoff, and Josh Dranoff, all work in the 8-county capital region, REDC, to support any municipality that wants our technical assistance for a number of sustainability actions. But today I'm going to focus, of course, specifically on alternative fuel infrastructure and alternative fuel vehicles. So the 2 programs that we provide technical support for through grants, actually, from these agencies, authorities, are the Nyserda Clean Energy Communities Program. We've been supporting that program since about 2016 here in the region. And more recently, the DEC's Climate Smart Communities Program, which was, I think, inspired by the Nyserda model, where there's on-the-ground support for these programs, and decided to fund their own effort to support the Climate Smart Communities Program. And I'll talk a little bit about what those programs specifically are, but they're both municipal focused programs. So all about municipal support with a few actions that kind of engage residents as well. So starting with the Clean Energy Program, this is just a map of New York State with all of the participating communities. And you can see that it's very popular. It's really just rewarding municipalities for doing actions related to greenhouse gas reductions. And there's money available, which is a big driving factor, match-free money, I should say. So it's been very popular. We're excited to get a lot of communities on board with this, and we are here to help communities kind of move through this process. So there's a bunch of what they call high impact actions in this program. I'm just going to talk about the ones specifically that relate to EVs and EV infrastructure, but you can see kind of the breadth of different actions that you could pursue or maybe are already pursuing with your government. So, but the 2 there, clean fleets and then community campaigns, I will discuss. So clean fleets is an action that basically gets you points towards grants for purchasing light or medium duty or heavy duty vehicles, basically. So the heavy duty vehicles piece of it is kind of a newer part that came up with the most recent round of the program. So we're really excited about that. Adoption with heavy duty vehicles is slow because they're expensive and hard to procure, but certainly light and medium duty vehicles, we've seen a large amount of communities pursue this. So by purchasing those, you get some points in the program, and then also by installing level 2 or DC fast charging stations that are municipally owned. And I will talk a little bit later about ways that you can actually, we can help you kind of get these stations and grant funding, some of which Jacob already kind of mentioned, but just some, ways to kind of get you to this point, not just saying you have to get there and get the points. So this action, community campaigns, it's a little bit different, and again, a newer action with the program. Basically, this is engaging municipal residents in EV purchases or, through an outreach campaign, basically. So depending on the size of your community, you'd either need 10 or 25 purchases. You'd be kind of tracking these purchases through an outreach campaign. And then the community can receive a grant of up to $15,000. There are communities that are working on this, a few that have actually already achieved the $5,000. So the town of Queensbury up in Warren County and the town of Clifton Park both received grants for engaging in this campaign. And it's an ongoing process. So once you hit that threshold, you don't have to stop. You can really keep going and keep promoting and educating residents about EV cars. So that was the Clean Energy Program. More recently, again, we've been supporting the Climate Smart Program through some state funding, and we're super excited to be working in this field. So the Climate Smart Program differs from Clean Energy in that it kind of moves into the adaptation and resilience field of climate change and climate policy. So whereas the other program, Nyserda program, just focuses on clean energy mitigation. So not as much, I mean, there still are actions, but of course the adaptation and resilience piece doesn't necessarily apply to electric vehicles and infrastructure as much. But this program is more robust. There's quite a few less communities that are participating just because it's a bit more challenging to kind of document and move through this process. But there are some actions in here that are interesting in that it kind of engages communities in the planning aspect too of fleet conversion. So these are the actions in there. Instead of the 13 actions that are in the Nyserda program, there's about close to 100, I think, different actions that communities can choose between and figure out what makes sense for them and what they may be already doing. So the alternative fuel infrastructure, very straightforward, exactly like the Clean Energy Program. You're getting points for installing EV charging stations or CNGV fueling stations, and there's additional points available for publicly available stations. Advanced vehicles, just like what it says, basically converting percentages of your fleet to EVs. So it's a matter of figuring out that percentage because this program does engage small and large communities. Onto kind of the planning pieces of it that are encouraged. So fleet inventories, so actually kind of taking an assessment of your fleet. These are the 11 kind of pieces of information that are required. A lot of times I work with a community and they just have like the insurance document for for understanding their fleet kind of inventory, but this does require a little bit more information, which again is all good to have so that you can analyze where you want to go. The fleet efficiency policy. So once you've done your inventory, just kind of understanding, where you want to go with your fleet and what kind of deadlines you want to set for your municipality. There's additional points for requiring 100% of new cars by a certain year to be EV or alternative fuel. And then finally, the concept of fleet right sizing. So you get points for reducing your fleet size by certain percentages, just kind of figuring out what you don't need. So we've helped a number of communities over the last 5 or 6 years that we've been working on this program kind of achieve actions. And, I've tried to get a good accounting of who's been doing what in this program, but I may have missed a few. So, but just generally understanding that a lot of communities are doing these publicly available charging stations that are owned by the municipality. A lot of them are using the grants that I'll talk about in a minute to do that work. So in many cases, sometimes getting free or very low match charging stations and managing them. Fleet EV conversion, of course, is a big one. And, just converting, the fleets in some way or another through some of the grants that we are able to offer through these programs. And then EV fleet stations. So, of course, you have to have a place to charge your stations once you've, or your fleets once you've converted them to EV. And there's been a lot of good press about this too. And I think that that's a big piece of it. You can see 2 press photos right here on this page. So it gets good publicity as well. So I just like to include this slide as far as, why, communities will ask me like, why is this important? I mean, we know a lot of the reasons why we want to convert to EVs, but sometimes the data speaks more than just kind of the, kind of sustainability feelings that we all have. or maybe most of us have. So EV infrastructure, from a perspective of economic development, I think is usually a good kind of case, is just getting people to your community, especially if it's not, if it's a small community. There's a lot of kind of rural villages that we've been working with that have installed this. So I usually highlight this map that Nyserda has that kind of shows the number of registrations in your community as well. This can tell you how many residents actually have electric vehicles and may be interested in using these stations to visit the town hall or government buildings or wherever, or parks that you may have. So this is Albany County, for example, and there's 2,619 registered EVs in the county, and you can kind of zoom in a little bit more than that too, and the types of vehicles. So just some good data points. And then as far as fleet EV conversion goes, just thinking about the cost. And there's some great analysis that has been done about long-term cost of electric vehicles. This was a 2019 study that basically compared all electric vehicles over the cost of 9 years or the 9-year period to gas vehicles, and they actually are cheaper by about $10,000 when you take into cost, the maintenance piece of it and all these other things. And of course, these prices have gone up since 2019. We all know that, but I think the ratio is likely the same when you're thinking about this type of stuff. So. So funding opportunities, a few of, like I had said, Jacob mentioned, so I won't go into super detail on them, but basically for municipalities, you've got a few funding sources. The DEC has their ZEV or Zero Emissions Vehicle Rebate and Infrastructure Grants. These are due by 9/30 of 2022. So if you haven't started doing these, time to snap to it. But they will be likely available next year as well. So we're very hopeful that these are kind of on an annual basis, usually released in like May. And they're very popular because there's not much funding out there right now. So they go through the Grants Gateway application, and there is quarterly reporting for 2 years after the install or purchase. So a little bit of reporting work that needs to be done. But overall, with the infrastructure grants, you can get 0 to 20% match depending on your disadvantaged community status or your area median income. So big pieces, getting maybe a station for free for your community, worth looking into, and then up to $500,000 for your community if you want to install multiple stations. And then for cars, there's rebates available of up to $7,500 depending on the range of the vehicle. And then Nyserda, as Jacob had mentioned, the Charge Ready New York program has kind of run out of money, and we aren't knowing if that'll come back. But in the meantime, I'll highlight the Clean Energy Communities program that I mentioned earlier, where you can get points towards match-free grants, which can be used for EVs and alternative fuel infrastructure. Actually, there's a few communities that the city of Albany, I believe, is using their grant that they just received to purchase a couple of electric vehicles. So lots of money out there for these types of things. And then finally, the utility rebates for make-ready costs, which can cover up to 100% of the make-ready piece of the infrastructure, not the full piece, but those can be matched with the ZEV infrastructure grants. So even if you have a 20% match, you could still potentially get a free station. Things out there. And then I'll just mention quickly that the DEC's Climate Smart Communities grants for certification actions, these are part of the CFA process, which is released in May and usually due by July. So this year's gone, but this was this year's actions. Fleet inventories and fleet efficiency policies will be funded as part of this, and it's a 50-50 match. So definitely worth thinking about and planning for next year. But as Jacob mentioned, there's a lot of other sources to do these, including CDTC, to do these fleet inventories and policies as well. So just keep your eyes out for those types of things. And that is all I have. Here's my contact information. If you want to contact me or any of my teammates, Jacob or Haley here, please reach out to us. And you can find my information here and there's on our CDRPC website.
Thanks, Tara. Next, we have Brandon Mortka from Plug-in Stations Online.
Hey everyone, I'm Brandon Mortka with Plug-in Stations Online. I have been with the company for about 2 years now, and I am the Director of Commercial Sales. We assist our customers providing a full turnkey EV charging solution. So we do everything from the electrical, the civil, all of the site work, including the utility applications, even some grant writing in the past. And we get our customers exactly where they want to be. We're located just outside of Albany and Valatia. I've actually done a lot of work with Luke Rogers in the past. We're doing a lot of work with Bethlehem and all the other local municipalities, really capitalizing on this grant that we're talking about. Our owner, John Duran, just some quick background on us, installed the first level 2 charger in New York State over 11 years ago now. We have a contract currently with New York Power Authority to install 20 DC fast charging sites across the state of New York. Some of them are at the Stewart's locations. You've probably seen them if you've been driving around. We're also working with MTA to install the first pantograph DCFC chargers. We're doing the same thing with MTA out of Buffalo, which is an ongoing project intended to transition the entire bus system in Buffalo to electric. So some basic overview on level 2 charging. There's 3 types of charging the utility companies will categorize it into. Level 1 really is just home charging, having a charger, a place to go when you're home. Most people will have this in their garage, but obviously not everybody is going to be able to charge at home. So hotels, apartments, it's important for them to install other means of charging. The next level of charging is level 2, which is most common. It's probably about 70% of what you see out in the field today. Very similar charging speed to the home charger, so not much different depending on the unit you go with. There's some bells and whistles you can add on, and I'll highlight some of those later on, but this is really comparable to home charging speed-wise for commercial properties, municipal properties, and then the third level of charging is DC fast charging, which is awesome. It can put up to 80% of almost all electric vehicles back into the car in roughly 10 to 20 minutes, depending on the power of the charger. But it's a really great perk. Obviously, it's a much higher price point, but it produces significantly faster charging speeds. And that's really where the highway corridor charging is going to be headed. And a lot of this future funding we're expecting to be catered towards DC fast charging projects. So there are many different types of level 2 chargers out there, and if you've ever looked into installing a level 2 charger, the first issue you probably run into is determining what type of charger you want to go with, what company. They have fleet chargers, they have commercial chargers, they have combinations of the two. So we really pride ourselves on helping our customers pick the best unit for themselves. At a high level, these units are intended to be installed where people are going to be spending a few hours, parks, municipal lots, sports facilities, workplaces, really the best place for level 2 chargers. The chargers on average will produce roughly 30 miles per hour, but ultimately that will depend on the vehicle and the station. So level 2 chargers have a wide variety of charging speeds. Really, it'll come down to the kW output of the unit and how much power is available on the charger itself. But a lot of the newer vehicles will also have the capability of charging a little bit faster, even on the same electrical output. So another thing to consider. Today, most drivers are only driving 20 to 40 miles a day. Some people much less, some people much higher, obviously, but in a lot of cases, a level 2 charger makes complete sense. When you talk to the average driver, they may say that they could never drive electric because they drive too much. But when you actually calculate how much driving you do, you would be shocked. So it's not always worth going into a DC fast charger. As mentioned before, a DC fast charger can put 80% into your car in 10 to 20 minutes. And the reason that it doesn't put 100% in a vehicle is it will trickle charge that last 20%, and that helps preserve the battery life. It helps preserve the plugs on the chargers. So you get that 80% real quick, and then that last 20%, depending on the unit, can go anywhere from 10 minutes to another 30, 45 minutes. Level 2 chargers are awesome for a few reasons. They can really be installed anywhere. You can install them on a post, a pedestal, a wooden pole. The utility companies will want them installed on a pedestal or a firm wall somewhere where they're not going to be damaged. In New York, we recommend installing cable management for all of our chargers. And this is really a winter thing. It's not as common down south, but the cable management will recoil the cords and plugs back into the charger. It'll give it a nice clean look. And on top of that, it will prevent your plow drivers from ripping them off the units. One thing to consider with these chargers, a lot of the level 2 manufacturers today kind of produce a product that's one piece. So even if you just break a plug or a cord, you may actually have to replace the whole unit. So it's important to consider spending a little extra, getting the cable management and making sure that you're safe from that side of things going down the road. An important part of level 2 charging, and I'll go into the funding in a bit here, is really to capitalize on the electrical funds. In New York especially, you know, we're dealing with a lot of old, outdated equipment. A lot of the jobs that we do now have old breakers, old panels, small services that are not anywhere near where people want the chargers. All things that are important to consider when doing your project. The utility funding, which has kind of been highlighted a little bit, and I'll go deeper into it, is expected to last until 2025. It can cover anywhere from 50, 90, or even 100% of all of your electrical and civil work on a site. So there is a cap. It's important to factor in some of the things that will eat away at that cap and make sure that you have the most possible power to be able to install more chargers in the future. Obviously, every day that passes, we have more and more electric vehicle drivers. So even though you could install a station today and it might not get the use you want it to get, a couple of years down the road, you would be shocked at how fast you need to install more chargers. So funding, today in New York State, almost all of the utility companies are offering funding on roughly the same outline. They all basically break it down, like I said, to 50, 90, and 100%. All of those categories have a cap, but like I said, this funding is expected to last until 2025. We do a lot of work in the New York City area with Con Ed, and the Con Ed money, which was also expected to last until 2025, is already declining rapidly, and we are finding a very, very hard time getting that funding. So it is important to capitalize, even though it's expected to last longer, as soon as possible. So National Grid will give you 90% coverage for your electric, your civil, really all of your installation work, as long as the charger is available to the public. If it's a fleet charger or a private charger intended just for your employees, or at schools, we'll see commonly a school will want just students and faculty to be able to use those chargers, they would get 50% coverage. You can get 100% coverage if you are in a disadvantaged community. National Grid defines a disadvantaged community as an area with low income. They also will sometimes qualify as a DAC areas near airports, a low air quality area, an environmental justice area is how they define it. If you want to look to see if your property or somewhere that would be good for chargers is in a DAC map to get that extra pot of funding, you can just go on Google and do a quick search for National Grid EV charging disadvantaged community map. Whether you're in Central Hudson or NYSEG, same thing. You'll just search your utility at EV charging DAC map. They all have a map on there. When you open up that map, you'll just do a quick search of your address. There's a search bar right at the top, and it'll show you exactly where you are and what you'll qualify for, depending on who your charger is available for. On On top of that, the utilities in New York all have a list of approved chargers. They have a list of approved installers as well. So unfortunately, you're unable to just go online, order a charger that you think will fit, and put that in the ground and hope you'll get the funding. Now, most good chargers are on the list. It's really not a limited list, but it is one thing to consider. And same thing with the electrician installing it. They have to be an approved supplier to be able to go through that application process. One thing we will provide for all of our customers, we will do the utility incentive for them. And really, in order to do that, all you need is a site plan, which shows approximately what the site's going to look like at the end of the day. And on top of that, you'll need your charging plan for how it's going to be set up, who will be available to. You'll need to submit the quote, very similar to the DEC ZEV grant. Utility programs, in order to get this funding, so they're not, unfortunately, they're not just giving out money. You will have to submit 5 years of usage. So one thing that we'll add to all of our quotes is networking. And the networking is basically the app on the back end that will allow you to go in and see the usage on the station. It'll show you how many people have used it, how many hours people have spent charging, how many hours in general the charger has been used for, your average time per day, stuff like that. 90% of the manufacturers and charging companies that you will go with, you'll just log right into your app. Right on that home screen, you'll have exactly what you need. And then once a quarter for National Grid or Central Hudson, they'll send you an email saying, hey, we're looking for your usage. You'll just take a screenshot of that app, submit it right there, and be good until the next quarter. They'll require this for 5 years. So most companies will sell you a full 5-year package so that you have that networking for 5 years. You'll also have the option to do it yearly, which I wouldn't recommend. It costs more to do it yearly, although it roughly comes down to $200 a year. If you go with better networking, it can be a little more than that. ChargePoint is a station that we install a lot of. They're one of the best level 2 options on the market today. However, with that said, it's a very expensive product. They know what they offer, and they have proprietary software. So if you determine you don't like their software a couple months into installing their stations, unfortunately, you'll have to either completely switch chargers or just accept that you have to use ChargePoint software. It's really good software. We ask all of our customers if they want to go with ChargePoint purely because it is the best level 2 option today. Roughly now they are responsible for 70% of level 2 chargers in the United States. As time goes on, that will go down simply because there's more and more companies coming out with chargers, comparable products at a lower price point. It's definitely not the only charger that will get the job done. So one thing that we pride ourselves on is we will do site visits for our customers for free. We'll see exactly what they're trying to do, work with them on a price point, and we'll make sure that we point them in the right direction with the right charger that fits their budget. As discussed by some of the other panelists, Nyserda in the past has historically provided funding for the chargers. This is different from the utility funding because the utility was just funding the make ready, which is all the work that goes into installing the chargers. The Nyserda program ended last year in October. We're hearing rumors that it's going to be coming back. However, it's very hard to predict where the funding is going to be catered. There's rumors that we're going to see it towards purely fast charging. There's rumors that we're going to see it towards purely corridor fast charging. So it is important to stay in tune with this project and see where this is going to be headed, but it's very hard to say right now. Historically, you have been allowed to apply for the Nyserda program, even if your project is recently completed or in progress when the funding came out. However, obviously that can be a little risky. The Nyserda program, when it was available, it was allowing you to stack the utility funding with the Nyserda funding, and people were installing chargers that didn't cost $4,000 a plug, and they were walking away with some money, and that money can be used towards paying to keep the stations up and running. Obviously, you have to pay for the electrical. In most cases, you'll generate enough revenue on the stations to pay for your electrical costs, and that's not a concern. But obviously, there are towns and areas out there where EV adoption is not yet where we want it to be. And you may actually lose some money on the electrical for a few years. Now, Locally, I don't think that's as big of a concern for us, but there are definitely places where that is something to consider. And another thing that we will help our customers do is pull usage on stations in their town, in their area, to see what towns around them are getting for usage and how long it will be by prediction before they start seeing green and getting some more money than what they're paying to run the stations. As discussed, the DEC ZEV program was available for municipalities. It's ending in roughly a week. This program historically has come back every single year, and it will cover up to 80% of your out-of-pocket cost. Again, this program will let you stack with the utility funding, so it's really great. You can apply the utility funding afterwards and kind of walk away with a little money left in your pocket. This will require a grant writer, and another thing we'll offer is grant writing services to help some of our communities get these grants in. We have done them a lot in the past. Now, with that said, most municipalities do have a grant writer on staff, so typically they will do it themselves. However, it is something we will offer. The grant in the past has been fairly tedious. However, this year it seems to be a little more people friendly. So if you haven't looked into it, it is pretty late, but it is definitely something worth putting your eyes on and maybe considering jumping on next year right when it comes out, assuming it does. But as mentioned, this has come out every single year. So we have a lot of faith that this will continue to go forward at least until 2025. And as mentioned, you can stack this funding. The utility and the DEC ZE funding can be stacked. If Nyserda comes back, we're anticipating that to be stackable with the utility funding as well. So there's also a tax credit available through New York State. And similar to Jacob, I am not a tax guy, so I'm not going to go too far into this. However, I have a link. I have a guy who I can connect you with who will give you up to 30% of your out-of-pocket cost returned at the end of the year. Now, obviously, you have to be eligible, but that program did get extended and it is operational in 2022. Things to plan for and ongoing expenses. So as mentioned with the utility program, you need to have 5 years of networking. I believe that the DEC ZEV program that's out right now is requiring actually 10 years of networking on top of 2 years of warranty. Most companies that sell you the chargers, most manufacturers producing chargers will give you at least 1 year of warranty. It's not always parts and labor. One thing that we always point out to our customers is you have to have the stations running for 5 years to get this utility money. If something happens to it and you're under factory warranty, you have the ability to fix the station at low cost or no cost. If you don't have the funding, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these chargers are one piece. So you could break something very small and very simple, and it could cost you significantly more than you ever plan on spending, just purely because you have to replace the entire thing. So having that warranty for 5 years is really important. Obviously, it adds to your upfront out-of-pocket cost, but in a lot of cases, as time goes on, this will help you preserve your chargers and keep them up and running. A great feature that ChargePoint has is they will actually allow you to keep renewing your warranty. So you come with the 1 year warranty, but you can purchase up to a 5, even a 10-year warranty. And then when that warranty runs out, they give you the option to renew it. Now, it's not cheap, but it's significantly less expensive than having to start over and buy something new. It's also important to note whether or not your warranty covers parts and labor or just parts. I will say most warranties out there right now are just covering parts. However, there are a lot of MFGs who will supply you with a parts and labor warranty. And with that said, just having a local company who can install the chargers and they're available to fix the chargers if something goes down. As mentioned, you have to be able to report usage for 5 years for the utility program. So if something goes down, you have to get it back up and running to be able to report that data, or else when the time comes to report it, the utility company will see and they'll try and get their money back. So just preparing for that 5 year term, both on the warranty and the network side, is really important. Especially with the grant, you'd rather have it all on there and get the most possible grant funding. As mentioned, plow drivers, They can be sloppy. It's New York, so you know we have hit or miss winters, but the chargers will all survive a winter. They're going to be usable in a thunderstorm, in a hurricane. Not that I would recommend that, but they will work. Occasional misusage from EV drivers can damage the station, so it's always important to consider installing a bollard, parking protection if it's a wall-mounted station, park stops, which you'll see commonly in some apartment complexes, things that will prevent people from carelessly driving too far and running your station over. In the past, when Nyserda was issuing funding for the stations, they were requiring installers to have EV parking signs up for those stations. Now that that program has ended, we're seeing a lot of stations going up without those EV parking signs only. So if it does come back and you do try and backdate and get your completed project funded, they may say, hey, you got to go in there and put some EV parking only signs up. I know that they were requiring you also to paint the associated parking spaces to be EV drivers only. Depending on how many chargers you had, they might have wanted you to put a handicap accessible spot up there, stuff like that. So even with the towns, when working on permitting, they may even require a handicap spot, EV parking only signs. So sometimes it's also a good idea to reach out to your town, your local municipality, and kind of see what their requirements are. It's definitely different town to town. When permitting, you know, sometimes we'll have a permit for a job in 24 hours with just a simple submission, and then other times we'll have to submit engineered documents, load studies. It can be an expensive process to get the permit. So it is one thing to consider, and definitely worth reaching out to your local municipality and seeing what their requirements are. Other things to consider when installing stations, obviously the closer to your power source, the better. It's important to capitalize on the utility funding and upgrade your services. They'll cover an extra 10% for future proofing, which basically means preparing to add stations in the future. We'll run conduit with no wire in it, sometimes from existing power sources to the next base down from when we're installing a station, so that in 2 years, if the customer decides, hey, you know, we want to add 1, maybe 2 stations here, we don't have to re-rip up their asphalt. We don't have to re-rip up their grass, and we can save cost by doing that and get that additional coverage from the utility company. So basically they will cover an additional 10% for oversizing electrical and having extra electrical available for more stations, and installing extra wire, installing extra conduit, really anything that you're doing to prepare for more stations in the future. They'll give you that extra 10% for. I kind of jumped the gun a little bit here, but it's really kind of comes down to common sense when installing things. So for the utility program, you know, they'll give you 90% if you're available to the public, up to $10,800 for every dual port station you install. So if you have to trench and rip up your whole parking lot, especially if it's prevailing wage labor, that stuff adds up quick. So a lot of the times when we do a job with a municipality or a customer who wants the chargers in a very specific location that requires some trenching, that requires some asphalt, you know, obviously we are available to do it, but sometimes it will make sense for the customer to actually do that portion of work themselves, especially if they have the machinery and the staffing available. It's just a good way to cut some cost. Now, we'll always recommend our customers to install chargers in the most logistical spot. Sometimes, you know, you'll have a utility pole 5 feet away, you'll have grass with some parking spaces, and you know, you dig 5 feet off the bottom of the pole. It's a very low cost, easy installation. But at the same time, you know, people want things to look good. They want things in very specific spots. So it's important to consider really digging and repairing what you're digging. The more you do, the more it's going to add to your cost. And you really want most of, if not all of your coverage from the utility companies going towards upgrading your electrical service, having a surplus of power there in the future. If you ever want to rip your chargers out and put in the latest, greatest technology, which 5 years from now, who knows what that may be, as long as you have the electricity available, chances are you're going to be looking at a significantly lower cost than you would be looking at had you not upgraded that electrical service. And that kind of goes back to saying that the utility funding is supposed to last until 2025. You know, at 2027, we might hit a point where there's so many EV drivers on the road and there's not enough stations and people are scrambling to get things done. So it really is important to get that funding and capitalize on that as much as you can. Think logistically. And one thing we pride ourselves on is helping our customers pick the most logistical solution to installing chargers in the most appropriate place where they have the ability to expand in the future. Yeah, so I have my email on here. Obviously, it's a lot to take in at once. You know, I do this every day, so it's easy for me to just talk quick and get through all of this. So if you have any questions or anything you're curious on, even if you're just looking for education and stuff to be pointed in the right direction on, we're happy to help. We do free site assessments where we'll come out, point you in the right direction, provide a quote, help you get where you want to be. And like I said, even if it's just educational conversation, we're definitely happy to help. So feel free to steal my email, reach out, spam me with emails, and no worries.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you.
Our last presenter is Lucas Rogers from Albany County Executive's Office. Lucas, you can go ahead and share your screen if you'd like.
Thank you, Jen. I'll pull this up, and I did see the time. I'm going to be quick here to make sure that everybody is able to sort of get out of here on time and see if if there's time for any questions at the end. So I'll work through these slides quickly. Full disclosure, I wasn't going to do slides, but after seeing everybody else have them, I did put a few together for you, and happy to share them. But again, Luke Rogers, I'm work for County Executive Dan McCoy here in Albany County, and I've been leading up our efforts to green our fleet and to encourage public adoption of electric vehicles. So just a few, these are really the big picture keys to success, not the nitty gritty sort of implementations, but starts from the top. I'm not just saying this because he's my boss, but the county executive has really pushed this and been out front on that. And why does that matter? It matters because we're a large organization with a large fleet. So you're it's not just about buying vehicles, it's about adoption of new technology. It's about a bit of a culture shift in some cases, and it's about in some cases additional costs and thinking outside the box and changes to how we've done things. So sometimes when you do that, you bump up against a few challenges, and it always helps to know that for me as the person implementing this on a day-to-day basis, that there's the support of the organization and the leadership to go down this road. Taking advantage of partnerships sounds obvious, but it's especially important in this space. Every presenter on this call today, I have worked with, I've learned things from, they've helped the county in our efforts to electrify our fleet, to install charging stations and many other things. And there are many other local organizations who've helped as well. And funding's been covered extensively, but obviously take advantage of available funding streams. I'm going to talk about this in two sort of categories, sort of internal to, on the one hand, meaning primarily county fleet and the associated charging stations, and then external, primarily public charging stations. So we are just currently putting the finishing touches on a comprehensive fleet inventory and electrification plan. This is something we RFP'd for, received several good bids, and are, decided to move forward with the company Energetics to the tune of, I think it's a $60,000 or $70,000 contract. So it's a significant investment, but if you have the resources, I would highly recommend it. It's taken lists and inventories of vehicles that we sort of had spread throughout different departments in the county, and there was nothing wrong with those lists, but we've taken them, put them all in one place, put a process in place to keep them up to date, but then really expanded upon them in terms of the information that we're tracking and what that allows us to do by matching up our fuel system with our fleet system, with our inventory, and so on and so forth, is have a very quick reference to, where every vehicle is, where our parking requirements are, which equals our charging requirements, what our typical use is for our vehicles. And that's important because, gas use can be a proxy to a degree for charging requirements. And it'll also allow us over time to sort of estimate our emissions reductions. And it'll also allow us to, and this is part of what we're asking the consultant to do, but sort of plan out the next few years of which vehicles it makes sense to replace first, from a cost perspective, from an age perspective, from a emissions perspective. So again, we sort of went for the gold or platinum version of this. I think there are more, you could probably do it for less and you'll just have slightly less detail, but it would still be of value. But we wanted really to get the comprehensive nature. At a high level, it makes sense for the county to look at electric vehicles because 90%, 95% of our vehicle use is out during the day, home at night. So there are not, while we drive a lot collectively, there's almost always an opportunity to charge at the end of the day. So most of our fleet is a good fit. And, obviously range continues to expand, but, we don't have a lot of range anxiety or range issues because of the nature of our fleet. I talked about the third bullet here in terms of what we're looking at, but it's really been a beneficial process to go through, really modernized our tracking and understanding of our fleet. And it's pulled in our departments into that process to get them really understanding the direction we're going in terms of the future of our fleet. This is sort of the biggest area where we've been learning and adjusting is procurement. We put out several bids over the last 6 months for certain types of electric vehicles, and we weren't getting any responses. And so what we're doing now is really engaging directly with dealerships and even manufacturers, local, regional reps for Chevy, for Ford, etc. Because with we're shifting, but they're also shifting. They're experimenting with different models for procurement or for selling electric vehicles. Use of subscription, use of sign up, and getting on waiting lists, etc., which can put municipalities at a bit of a disadvantage. But by working directly with the manufacturers, they've given us a lot of insight into the exact timing of when the order banks open up, when they close, and then we can back up from that and identify the best time to put out our solicitations on the state's OGS vehicle marketplace, so that we actually get the bids that we're looking for. So whether it's Ford Lightning or the EV Transit or just a more common, Chevy Bolt, etc., that work on the front end pays dividends on the back end, because sometimes these order banks are only open for a month or two. And if you're a municipality like us who has to go through procurement and then go through approvals, whether it's our legislature or other approval processes, it really takes a concerted effort to be able to purchase these vehicles. But if you want to make it happen, you can. You just, really focus on the timing. Purchase versus lease is a question that we've looked at and a lot have looked at. We are in the purchase camp for now. Doesn't mean we won't lease, but my general thinking is if you can afford to purchase, it tends to be cheaper over the life cycle. Leases can get you some vehicles more quickly, perhaps. If you have a really old fleet, leases might be a quicker way to modernize and electrify. But we don't really meet either of those criteria. So far, we've really leaned into purchasing. We'll see if that changes at all. Grant driven to budget driven. What I mean by that from the municipal perspective is the first 6 or 8 EVs that we purchased were grant funded, with many of the streams that have been mentioned by Tara, by Jacob, by Brandon. And part of my effort over the last couple of years has been, how do we transition electric vehicles from sort of a novelty that we purchase when we get grants to this is our normal course of action. When we go out to get vehicles, we get electric vehicles, and we're using county funds to do so. And making it the norm instead of sort of the special grant funded purchase. And everything in terms of procurement sort of paused over the last year or two, or at least 2020 and 2021, given the financial situation we were in during the pandemic. But as we bounced out of that, we're really launching now into the main, as the study I referenced wraps up, the major effort to start turning over our fleet and purchasing 8, 10, 12 of these a year, and really putting a crack into the percentage of our fleet that is electric. At different procurement approaches, just to highlight, we've taken several approaches for the municipal folks on here. We've, in some cases, put out bids or solicited bids for installation of charging stations, including including equipment and installation. We've gone off a state contract in some cases. In one instance, we had a little bit of grant funding left over, and we just bought stations and then put out bids for the installation. So we've done it kind of, I think, every way you can, depending on our circumstances, and there are pluses and minuses to each of those. Sticking with the sort of the internal, there is less grant funding when you're installing fleet stations. It's been a bit of a frustration of mine, but it is the approach that the state's taken. So while you can get some of the make ready funding, and while there are creative ways to sort of hybrid fleet and public stations, that really hasn't been our approach. So we have to make sure we have the funds when we're doing fleet stations. And site work can get costly depending on the location, how much you're trenching, what you have to get through. Is it in an existing facility? All can drive those site work costs up. So that's something to be cognizant of. On the funding front, going off of this sort of normalization side of things, making EVs the norm. We did, for the first time last year, have a new item in our capital plan, which we kind of have called the green bond. And that has funding for several types of sort of green infrastructure, but included in that, in addition to some building related categories, there's funding flexibility there for vehicles and for the associated charging stations. So that was important to have a dedicated funding stream to assist with this transition. Making the case, it is change for some people. So explaining some of the things that have been touched on today, the amount of grant funding, the life cycle costs and savings, lower maintenance costs, et cetera, are all part of making the case to, in our case, our legislature or the general public. And one component of that as sort of government, and this touches back to the county executive's approach here, but is wanting to lead by example and lead the way towards greening our fleet as we try and encourage more adoption in the community. And then I think the last slide is switching more to the external. We have made an effort to install public stations pretty much everywhere we can. I think we have 34 ports of stations installed within the county, all on county properties. We've done a couple of rounds of these. The first focused on locations that were most frequently visited, like our MVP Arena garage, which attracts both employees during the day and visitors in the evening. Our nursing home, which has frequent visitors, our rail trailhead in Bethlehem, which is very popular. And then the second round really focused on sort of building off of that, putting charging stations in at all of our parks and amenities. So other trailheads that we have, our Lawson Lake County Park, our hockey facility, and Lee County Park, making sort of it's a small component of it, but a tourism attraction and sustainability effort. And we did in that approach, look at some of the resources that CDTC and others have put together to try and plot out gaps in the overall regional network. We are limited to where our properties are, so it wasn't a perfect fit, but we did do that where we could. On this side, as has been indicated, there's significant grant funding. I'd love to see Charge Ready come back. That's great to hear that there's whispers of that. It's a little bit simpler of a program, at least was in the past, although the DEC program is great as well. And one just sort of word of caution or recommendation, as you get towards 20, 30 stations, it's definitely, I would recommend dedicating, it doesn't have to be a full-time staff person, but somebody who's already in your organization, make sure they're dedicated to troubleshooting, managing these stations, making sure they're online. You do get public feedback through the apps and everything in terms of if the station is down, but it's important, it becomes a bit of a task. And so I think that's all I put in here. Contact info. I think I was quick. Let's see.
Yes,
Pretty
very. Thank you,
I'm happy
Lucas.
to answer any questions.
So we have time for one question. Mark asks, well, he says he read somewhere that Albany County plans to electrify the fleet by 2025. Is that the whole fleet or only new vehicle purchases?
So I think it's 2026, but it is, but yeah, that is the light duty fleet. And that incorporates cars, that incorporates, small trucks. And the reason that distinction was made was simply what's available on the market. We would love to say our whole fleet by that time period, but they don't have electric plow trucks yet. They don't have some of the heavy duty vehicles that make up a good portion of our fleet. It's something we looked at in our study. We asked the consultant to really scan the market and see what's out there. And we're happy to pilot. We're happy to be the demonstration. But in terms of a large scale transition for those Class 7, Class 8 vehicles, it's just going to take time. So that goal is for light duty, which I think is about 115 or 120 of our 200 or so vehicle fleet.
Thanks, Lucas. We did go a little bit over time. I apologize for that, but thank you to all of our panelists today. And this has been recorded. It will be on the CDTC YouTube channel and our website. If you attended, you will receive an attendance certificate so you can claim your CM credits if you're AICP. Again, thank you so much and have a good afternoon.
Thanks, everybody.